welcome to episode number 24 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. We have Dustin Gouker, we have Eric Ramsey, and making her triumphant return to the podcast, we have one, Jess Welman. Jess, thank you for making time for a few knuckleheads to talk about this gaming industry with us.
I'm happy to be back.
We are going to be, and this is a shameless plug, guys, but we are going to be doing the podcast live from G2E here in a couple of weeks. So if you are listening to this and you're important and you'd like to be on the podcast, hit up Dustin Gouker. Don't come to me. Dustin's the important one. So Dustin, I'm going to tell them to hit up your DMs and blow up your DMs if they are an important person in the industry and would like to talk to us on the podcast.
Yes, everybody always tells me how they'd like to be on the podcast. This is an easy way to be on the podcast and talk to us. So
yeah.
We'll happily, if you're in Vegas, we'll happily talk to you. You may end up on the cutting room floor, who knows? But we'll talk to you.
Right. Well, we can't promise that you'll make it, but Eric will just be sitting over in the corner giving the thumbs up or thumbs down. Like you'll just
I do best. Just like Roman Coliseum, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how we decide. But again, all seriousness, we are going to be doing the podcast live from G2E, so be sure and hit up Dustin through the DMs on the Twitter machine. I know you follow him anyway, so if you want to talk about some stuff that you've got going on or anything that is pretty interesting in the industry, we certainly want to talk to you as well. We have some massive news, maybe the biggest gaming news of our lifetimes anyway. There certainly could turn out to be. We will make that the focus of this podcast and talk about it a little bit towards the end here, so be sure and stick around. But let's go ahead and kick things off here with DC. And we are talking about the District of Columbia here, Dustin.
Yeah, we've got the William Hill Sportsbook is going into Capital One Arena, which is the home of the Wizards, the Capitals, and the Mystics. This is the first time a sportsbook will actually be in a U.S. stadium or arena. So from that standpoint, really big deal. Right before that, William Hill signed a partnership with the NBA, which is obviously probably meant to smooth the rails for this to make it happen. So, this was always happening and going to happen, but it's finally has happened. I don't know if I could have predicted the speed at which this happened, but yeah, we have a sportsbook in an arena where you'll be able to actually bet on at least NHL games while they're going on in a sportsbook in the arena. Again, you could have bet like on phones in a lot of states and stadiums, but that's a whole other level, actually putting a sportsbook in an arena.
Eric, the thing about this, however, is we say that they partnered with the NBA, but they are now just one of a lot that have partnered with the NBA. So whenever in case you guys are not listening to every single episode of the podcast here and don't know all of the content deals and partnership deals and all the different things that are going on, you can catch up all those at legalsportsreport.com, obviously. But as far as league partnership deals, they are not alone with the NBA here.
Yes, actually the fourth for the NBA. And if you Google sports betting partnerships, you will see we have a page for this on LSR, a tracker for these partnerships. This is the fourth deal for NBA. The first was with MGM. That was the one that sort of christened these sorts of arrangements between gambling companies and the leagues. Then added BetStars, FanDuel, and now William Hill. So I know this gets Dustin worked up when the leagues talk about the irreparable harm and the maladies of sports betting out of one side of their mouth while they're making these multi-million-dollar deals out the other side.
Jess, you are a sports fan.
No, wait, I want to be angry first.
Yeah, okay.
Excuse me. How dare I chime in then?
Whoa.
I'm sorry I cut your moment of glory off, but it does make me angry because this was the whole argument, right? Like, oh, you can't have sports betting because it's gonna kill the integrity of our leagues. Now we're just a year and a half after the federal sports betting ban fell, and look, we put a sports book inside an arena, and all of a sudden everything's great. This is really great. We're no integrity concerns. We can just have sports betting in the arena. Totally different from what we were saying less than 2 years ago. It is obnoxious. Sorry. Now you can ask Jess.
Yeah. So Jess, you're a sports fan. Obviously, gone to tons of sporting events. I don't know how many of your friends sports bet or are inclined to sports bet, but let's just put in a hypothetical situation that you go to a game with 3 or 4 of your friends, and there happens to be an avenue for them to place a bet within the place that y'all are going to watch the game. And let's say they're not, they don't bet often enough to where it's worth downloading an app and funding an app or whatever it might be. But do you see just casual people and maybe stumbling up to a sports book inside of an arena because, hey, what the hell, I'm here anyway?
Yeah, I can see that happening, especially, I mean, my friends who sports bet are generally poker players, which means they're lazy, which means they're going to do it on their phone. I think that's where this is going to be still primarily happening in arenas and at sporting events. But, you know, depending on location, if you're walking by a sports book and you hadn't thought to bet before, it certainly seems like, hey, I don't have to wait in line all that long. Let's get some action on the game and make this boring game a little more interesting.
Yeah, other than I'll say, other than the Vegas sportsbooks, correct me if I'm wrong, this might be like the best location. Like, this is downtown DC.
Oh yeah,
tons of foot traffic. You're going to a game or just like going to watch it you might watch a game at a bar in DC. Like, oh, why don't I go watch the sportsbook instead? That seems like a pretty good location. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. Where else is there a sportsbook that's in like this kind of a central location with perhaps lots of foot traffic going by?
Yeah, I don't think anything can really match. It has a lot going for it in location, certainly, and it sounds like they plan to have the sportsbook open, on game days and non-game days. It also will serve as some sort of restaurant or bar thing. So this should be obviously a really valuable piece of real estate for a sports betting operator.
Now, quick question on this.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not a ticket holder, can you go to the sportsbook when there are games happening?
Gonna have to figure this out. They're gonna have to close off one side of this. They're gonna either have to close the restaurant to the public, or they're gonna have to close the restaurant to the arena and not allow patrons to come and go. I don't know is the short answer.
I do know that I don't know the exact logistics Jess is asking about, but it's closed from the inside during NBA games. I know you can't go from the game to the sportsbook. You can go in from the outside, but during NHL games, I'm pretty sure you can go in from the inside and then also probably from the outside, and then they're somehow checking tickets. I'm not exactly sure how the logistics work. I mean, we haven't even gotten real approval for this or broken ground on what it's going to look like, but there's going to be some of that for sure.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania is kind of doing some of this at Wells Fargo with their assembly room, which will have like a sugar house component to it. And they are making it so that it's a little more available to the public for like a $10 fee. You can get in there and be at the arena in the sports betting area, I think, but it's not a book. It's just sponsored by Lounge. It's interesting to me how they're going to, balance between needing a ticket to bet and making the most out of having a sports book there.
It seems to me, I kind of envision this like going through airport security, like where like once you go in a certain route, you're not able to really circle back out of that route without going through some big to do over and over again. But again, I'm speculating, but I can only assume it's like it's not that it's one way, but like that it's almost like a one way. Like once you go in a certain way, then that's just how you're in there and that's how things are going to go and whatever. Regardless, this is going to be pretty awesome. And certainly, as you mentioned, Dustin, I mean, as outside of, you can obviously walk to the T-Mobile arena from, Park MGM and New York. So you can easily go place a bet real quick and then walk over to the arena here in Vegas. But I mean, outside of Vegas, I mean, this is by far, I think, the most prime location for a sportsbook.
Yeah, absolutely. From that standpoint, it was also worth noting that you'll be able to bet on an app, William Hill app, in the arena. But I think it's, again, like because of the law in DC, there's a larger part of the law here that you can do it within a 2-block radius. So you'll be able to do it at the actual sports book and a little bit outside, but it's not like you can bet on William Hill anywhere in DC. That's a larger part of the law there. And it's kind of, and Jess mentioned like Wells Fargo Center in Philly, the Prudential Center in New Jersey. Those also have like these sports betting lounges that are, we've made a big deal of this, but there's sports betting lounges where they're encouraging you to sign up on an app. So those are almost de facto sports books inside arenas as well, although they're not, not quite the same as this, where you're actually, physically going up to a sports book teller who's saying, "Oh, yes, I'll take your bet." That's a little different. So,
Eric, people who have listened to this podcast for a long time, they're going to say, "Wait a minute, you guys are sitting here talking about William Hill. You were jumping up and down about this whole lottery thing over there. Can you explain a little bit as to what's going on with all of that lottery stuff?"
Yeah, we don't know how quick we'll see this sportsbook inside the arena. Right now, sports betting is stalled in the district. There is a lawsuit over the contract they procured for Intralot. This was the big controversial $215 million deal to cover lottery and sports betting. A couple of lawmakers have raised concerns about the way that contract was procured, and that's going through the court system. The next hearing is October 18th. In the meantime, the lottery cannot make any payments to Intralot and cannot begin sports betting on its own. They can theoretically start issuing these licenses to the arenas and other facilities, but I don't think there's a big incentive to. Part of the reason to single source the contract was to sort of have a monopoly over most of the district. So, we might see these arenas get licensed before the district wide situation shakes out, but I would not expect to see the regulators move until that has a resolution in the courts.
As always, you can follow this drama as well over on LegalSportsReport.com. We will certainly keep you updated on how all of this stuff shakes out. Guys, we have to welcome. I wish we have a sound. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have Colton, our producer, going to put in a sound right now, Colton. There we go. Whenever we get a
really good sound too.
Yeah. Whenever we have a new state go live and actually get going here, whether it be just taking bets in general or taking bets over the web and mobile. But Eric, we do have, in fact, one of those states on this podcast.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one, too. This one is Indiana, our second state in the Midwest to have online sports betting. They remember their retail betting launched September 1st. And on Thursday, October 3rd, they went online with BetRivers and DraftKings. DraftKings scrambled to get approval right at the last minute. Both are up and running. Both are operating on the Candee trading platform for whatever that's worth. And yeah, it's the seventh state with mobile betting. It's the third state for DraftKings. Yeah. What else you want to know?
Well, I mean,
I will say,
yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead, Jess.
I was going to say, as someone who, being from Kentucky, Indiana is where I went to casinos. If you have not been to Indiana, retail betting is even more marginal than in other states, because the whole concept of Indiana casinos is that they are out in the middle of nowhere. So this is actually really the start of sports betting in Indiana. Retail's another piece of it, but that's itty bitty, the little new potatoes, small potatoes compared to where they're at now.
Yeah, and this will draw some interest from the Chicago area, at least in the short term, until Illinois gets up and running. But you can get to the border of Indiana from downtown Chicago in, less than an hour, half hour maybe. So I think you will see some encouraging numbers out of Indiana this fall for football season. We'll have to see how it goes in the long term, but I'm expecting a lot from Indiana.
Yeah, Dustin, I mean, this is certainly, if you're DraftKings, you're happy that you're getting a state in Indiana, but you're really, really happy at this juncture that Illinois hasn't been able to get their act together up there, because you're also going to be getting those people.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the map of Indiana and what's around it, and it's kind of good. This is just hard to find, other than New Jersey with its access to New York. It's hard to find something where you're better situated for kind of drive over the border traffic. You have, like you said, Chicago right there. There's already, I think we know a lot of people from Chicago that are going to be going to bet in Indiana and get the mobile apps, or who live in Chicago and work in Indiana, or vice versa. And then there's you got Cincinnati and Louisville right next to. We have Ohio might be working. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but Ohio doesn't have sports betting yet. Kentucky doesn't have sports betting yet. Michigan to the north doesn't have sports betting yet. Not necessarily a huge population base just to the north, and then you have Illinois, which is kind of a bit of a mess right now for getting sports betting up and running. And they won't, even when they do go live, you're going to have to go to a casino to register. So just as compelling to say, I have a short trip over to Indiana to place a bet or sign up for an app. Indiana is really pretty well situated, at least in the short term, to really profit and get things going. And I'd be excited if I was an operator going live in Indiana.
I'm looking here, and I used the internet while you were talking, and I used the Google Maps, and Chicago to Whiting, Indiana, which is the first state that I could the first city that I could see that is actually kind of like across the border here. according to them, is about 35 minutes in the car. So you're talking about, a little over a half an hour. And the good thing about NFL, as we all know, it is a once a week sport. So, I mean, if it's something that you wanted to bet on, every couple weeks or every week or whatever it might be, you're able to just drive down there. You can make all your NFL bets just kind of like all in one fell swoop and then turn around and go back home. And it's not like baseball or basketball or hockey where there's games every single night. And if you really want to take it seriously, it certainly behooves you to live in the state where you're able to just do it kind of right then and there. But with football, I mean, you can make the 30-minute drive, go put in your plays for the entire week and turn around and kind of go home. Not really that big of a deal. So, yeah, I mean, 35 minutes by car from Chicago, I'm sure DraftKings is incredibly stoked about this. Yeah.
If I was a sports bar right across the border, I'd be like buying billboards, like come watch games and bet on sports here in Indiana, right? Like that, and like hell, call up DraftKings and Rivers and say, hey, you want to? We'll push whichever one of you wants to like get signups for us. We'll work with you. Like I don't know, like that's a little thing, but it's also like there's enough people I'm sure driving back and forth like who that's something that would happen and would drive some sort of meaningful revenue. And like just if I was a sports bar, it's like a no-brainer. Get people in, watch football games, right? So
yeah. Well, in all of the cities you've mentioned, it's like Philadelphia, where the burbs of Chicago go into Indiana, the burbs of Cincinnati go into Indiana, the burbs of Louisville, same thing. So a lot of people already in Indiana and are driving over to these other states for work and can bet when they get home at night.
Look at this. See, this is what we get by having Jess. We have the Midwest insights here that we do not.
As someone who has logged hundreds of hours at Caesars Southern Indiana, I can tell you I would be thrilled to pieces that I just have to cross the bridge into New Albany versus drive the 20 miles to the riverboat. That I will say, I bet my Louisvilleans think this is a big deal.
So, I mean, obviously, Chicago being a huge thing here, but you mentioned that you did a lot of stuff in Indiana from Kentucky. I mean, how far is say Louisville or something like that from the border?
Downtown Louisville to Indiana is a matter of crossing a bridge.
All right.
That seems pretty convenient.
It's minutes. Cincinnati, it's a little wonkier. It's not as easy to get to Indiana, but Louisville, it's basically a 5-minute drive.
Well, look at that. I mean, we're sitting here talking about how, I mean, granted, Chicago, one of the major cities in the country, but Louisville has got a decent little population base. I mean, that's
and it's a good sports town. Yeah. There's Cardinals fans, there's UK basketball fans, like there's a big college push in Kentucky, but Indiana gaming in general, the whole concept of the way they set it up is we're going to put little places, casinos in rinky-dink towns and get all these people coming from the other states and keep them away from our big cities. So, the way that this has been set up for years is just panning out really well right now with online, making it even easier.
Can't wait to see what the liability on Notre Dame is going to be whenever those numbers start coming out. It is going to be very interesting because, as we've seen, the liability in these states whenever they go live is pretty interesting for the hometown teams. Real quick, though, because we missed last week, DraftKings did partner with the NFL, but Dustin, no, not that way. They partnered with them through the DFS arm.
Yeah, not for sports betting. DraftKings is a quote unquote. I was using air quotes for those listening at home. Not for sports betting. They are the daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL. Because we all know it's very easy to totally separate the sports betting and daily fantasy brands of DraftKings. It's all one thing at this point. You can say all you want that you're only promoting the daily fantasy, but at this point, so much of DraftKings business and brand recognition is tied up in sportsbook that it's really hard to say, oh yeah, this is a sports betting deal. Now, how much DraftKings paid for this with the wink, wink, nod, nod, this isn't for sports betting. Like, I don't know if the NFL made them pay a sports betting price for this, or maybe they got a discount because it's just daily fantasy and they're working on a sports betting deal too. But this is still a big deal for DraftKings. It definitely helps legitimize them, lets them use league marks and they can say the Super Bowl now in daily fantasy contests instead of the big game like they have for their showdown contests in the past. So it's a big deal. deal. Obviously, probably cost a lot of money or equity for the company, but I would dare say, a pretty good move for the company.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and certainly something when you consider what we will talk about here towards the end of this podcast, certainly something that they're going to need all the help that they can get. And I certainly think that, having any sort of partnership with the NFL is pretty huge, pretty big for the company. And, as anyone would, with a half a brain would say, it doesn't really matter that it's quote unquote for DFS. They go by the same brand. It's still DraftKings. Nobody says, hey, I placed a bet at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's like, no, I mean, yeah, what are the numbers out at DraftKings? What are the number out at FanDuel? Like the names are now synonymous with the companies. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about DFS or whether you're talking about sports betting. So yeah, I mean, this is essentially a giant advertisement for the sports betting arm as well.
Yeah, look, you're helping, the NFL's helping DraftKings acquire customers in future sports betting states. That's happening too. Like you get a DFS customer, that's something you're trying to convert to sportsbook. And you go to the DFS site, or you're like literally right there next to it is a tab for sportsbook. It's not like it's some huge firewall between sportsbook and DFS. It's not the case. You can't bet obviously unless it's in a state. But it's just funny to me. That's the first when I heard the news, it was the first thing that I thought. It was just funny that we're definitely just DFS, not sports
right. Yeah, it's pretty definitely funny. All right, Jess, we talk a lot about Pennsylvania on this podcast without you, which is just not right, and we should have you on every single time we want to talk about Pennsylvania. But now that we've had a little bit of time to have some things mature there in Pennsylvania and everything, since everything's gone live, give us just the state of the union, if you will.
I think the last time I was on here, we didn't have Fox Bet yet. So Fox Bet has been live for about a month now. And, we'll talk about kind of how this mega merger is going to create a big thing nationally. It definitely impacts Pennsylvania and kind of creates a situation where 1 and 2 are going to be FanDuel and probably Fox Bet and be kind of big players in Pennsylvania. One group that is very close to coming in. We thought DraftKings would get the approval it needed at the October 2nd Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board meeting. They're still a step away. They're going to present on October 30th. Once they get those key approvals, it could be just a week before DraftKings is up and running. I would say within the first 2 weeks of November, you're going to see DraftKings live and ready to bet on your phones in PA. I cannot say the same for online poker. I feel like I just needle all the poker people, but we continue to write updates that are, guess what? We checked in. It's close, but not on the calendar yet.
So when we look as we sit today, there's Sugar House and Bet Rivers. There's also FanDuel. And is that the extent of online sports books in Pennsylvania as of Friday, October the 4th?
You've got Fox Bet and Parks as well. Parks is kind of an also ran in this one. They just aren't offering the same kind of promos. However, this is kind of funny. Talking about stadiums earlier, they just did a deal with Wells Fargo Center, or the Philadelphia 76ers, rather. And they are, and I quote, the official winning partner of the Philadelphia 76ers, because the 76ers have already pimped out their casino partnership to Harrah's Philadelphia. So you've got Harrah's Philadelphia, who has a deal with the 76ers. You have Parks, who has a deal with the 76ers. And then you have Sugar House, who through the Flyers and Wells Fargo Center are going to have a branded sports book or sports lounge in this new section of the arena that not only is there going to be sports betting in the Wells Fargo Center, there's going to be an abundance of branding. And they've kind of made a lot of promises to a lot of people and entities in Pennsylvania. And it'll be interesting what that balance is at the end of the day.
We haven't even gotten into this, but I haven't checked on this. But as of last season, DraftKings was still like a presenting sponsor of the Sixers too. Like their starting lineup on Twitter every day was presented by DraftKings. So
but that's DFS. That's not gambling.
That's sorry, not gambling at all. Just for the DFS.
And Eric, I mean, we're kind of like, while we're on the 76ers here, you and I know, I mean, these guys have been really into this gaming space for quite a long time. I mean, you and I worked on an event way back in the day where it was actually because they were partnered with Party Poker, if you remember. So like these guys have always been in some sort of iGaming space. They've always wanted to partner with someone here.
Yeah, that was pretty early too. That must be probably 5 or 6 years ago now that they had Party Poker on the court, Party Poker advertisements on the court. So they've been, shaking hands with gambling for a long time over there at Wells Fargo.
Yeah, good on them. Good on them. So Jess, the best you can kind of estimate here for people who are in Pennsylvania and want to try out a new book, you think DraftKings sometime in the next 3 or 4 weeks?
I would say a month from now.
There you have
Pretty
it. We're
close to a month from now.
Well, I'll let you know what we do to people on this podcast because Dustin has felt the wrath as well. Whenever you give a timeline on something or you make a guess on something, we're going to hold you to it. And when you're wrong, we're going to publicly shame you on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm confident enough in this one that they're
on the podcast. Nobody, I've never been held accountable once.
And I mean, as someone who's come on and talked about Pennsylvania a lot and been super wrong all the time, I don't really recall this happening in the past, but I'm confident about this one. Their ducks are pretty well in a row. They just didn't make it on the agenda this time around. The DraftKings branded retail sportsbook is opening soft launch on October 8th, which is just a week after its approval. So it seems like they're really just waiting for this last box to tick before they can go live.
Jess is talking about ducks being in a row. So Dustin, what a segue to talk about Oregon. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Apparently in 3 days I will be able to bet on an app in the great state of Oregon. That's if the timeline goes as we have reported. Obviously this has been held up by some delays, but we talked about Indiana. That's the 7th states with online betting around the statewide, and then Oregon will become the 8th, although you will not be able to bet on tribal land. So you have to shut it down when you're driving through one of the tribes that's in the middle of nowhere here in Oregon. But another exciting time. Just one app here. If you're listening in Oregon, you will not be DraftKings and FanDuel here. You'll be getting a single app, and we'll hope that it's a quality one.
So if you are driving in your car, it will be geofenced around tribal lands.
Yes, if you're driving through the reservation where a casino is located, that's what I believe is going to happen. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. Or if you're in one of the tribal casinos.
Yep, that's how I understand it too.
Well, Dustin, you're just going to have to stay off tribal lands, my friend.
That's not hard to do. What's closest for me is like if I'm driving to Portland, you don't even get cell service there anyway, so all good.
There you have it. You'll just have to wait to scratch that itch when you actually get to Portland. Yeah, you just don't worry about it till then. All right, Eric, talk to us about Michigan and Ohio.
Oh yeah, more Midwestern states. These two are two of the few that may actually pass a law before the end of the year. We will start in Michigan. That's the one that actually passed an online gambling bill last year before the previous governor vetoed it. The sponsor there, Brant Iden, he is the long-standing sponsor of this effort. He is pushing now separate bills for sports betting and online gambling. He has decoupled them from each other, trying to get one of them to pass. Sports definitely has the better chance of the two to pass, so it seems probably like a good move to separate these. I still, I'm really not optimistic about this. He says he has tremendous bipartisan support, probably even enough to override a veto. But the governor, there's some tension between the governor and the legislature. The governor also has demands for sports betting legislation that would make it untenable. So, it's going to require them getting on the same page. And right now, the governor won't even come to the table to talk about it. So we're still a ways away in Michigan, but the sponsor is trying diligently. So that is some cause for encouragement. Ohio just kind of beginning the process. They have a 2-day hearing next week in the House Finance Committee where they're going to try to hammer out the details of this bill. There are competing bills in Ohio. One goes through the Lottery Commission, another through the Casino Control Commission. The governor supports one model. The legislators support another model. So we have some room for negotiations and battling and term setting in Ohio too, but also on the path. That one maybe a little more optimistic. It's hard to pin down an odds for that one. But Michigan and Ohio both still among the few states in play here in 2019.
So in play, but let's go ahead and make you make a prediction. Feet to the fire. What does your gut tell you?
I mean, it's hard to call anything Ohio anything but a pick 'em right now. There's just not enough info to sway me one way or the other. Michigan, probably a 3-1 underdog as I sit here right now. And online gambling in Michigan is dead. Don't even think about that. It's over. No online casino in Michigan, but sports betting, still an underdog.
All right, sad trombone music right there, but that's sad trombone. But we're saying there's a chance though.
There's a chance.
We're holding out hope. All right, guys, let's move to the big story, and let's not even say of the week. Let's just say of the immediate future, immediate memories of anything that we have within this gaming industry here. We have lived through, between the four of us have lived through, a combined 4 or 5 decades of gambling news here, but this is one of the biggest since I have been around here. Flutter, and if you don't know what Flutter is, it is actually, it used to be Paddy Power Betfair. They changed the name whenever they did all of these acquisitions and whatnot. But anyway, let's just consider it Paddy Power Betfair. When they went in, acquired, of course, FanDuel and TVG. They also own Sportsbet. And the Stars Group that you well know is the parent company of PokerStars. They also went in and bought big gaming companies over in the UK, Skybet, and they also are big partners with Fox, as we've talked about on this podcast, with their media partnership and how they rebranded BetStars here in the States with Fox Bet. Well, we woke up on Wednesday morning, or Thursday morning, I guess it would be. Wednesday morning, to a massive press release saying that these two companies were going to merge. Dustin, when you look at this, just on the surface, what was your initial reaction when you saw this? Because again, we've seen a lot of these mergers, we've seen a lot of acquisitions, we've seen a lot of things go on in this gaming industry. I don't know if anything this big has happened since I've been around.
Yeah, it's in the online gambling space, it's the biggest news for sure that's happened in probably ever. As big as it gets in the industry for sure. It's hard to wrap your mind around the scale of either of these companies individually, and then now you're mushing them together into one super company, and that's kind of crazy. I don't think we'll talk too much about the international aspect of this, but this is two companies combined for almost 4 billion pounds of revenue 2018. They serve between them 100 countries around the world. Absolutely staggering size of a new company. Obviously, not every job is going to survive. There's going to be some synergy and downsizing, because you're just not going to continue operating these two companies the same way they were before. So, but yeah, absolutely two huge companies. I was like, holy crap! I know Jess had texted me at like 11:30 at night. You were awake.
I was like,
but I was asleep.
It seems DEFCON enough that I should just start calling everyone.
Yeah, you could. I might not have answered, but you could have called me. But it was like I happened to like look at my phone at 4 o'clock and say, oh, there's the Flutter press release saying this, and I'm like, oh, well, the world has changed for whether it's for the better or not, I don't know. But I think what we'll talk about is the U.S. implications here, because that's what we focus on, and that's really, this deal is international in nature, but it's really, I think, a huge part of it is what's going to happen in the U.S. and what these two companies bring to bear here.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can talk to start the kind of conversation here is the fact that with a combined company here, what you're getting is almost every way you can possibly reach anyone that has any inclination to do any sort of gambling whatsoever, because you have Betfair, which has the casino that is already operating over in New Jersey. So they have online casino through Betfair. You have FanDuel that obviously has the sports book and has the DFS angle. They have TVG, which if you are not in the horse racing industry, you may have not heard of. But TVG, one of the biggest, if not the biggest brands in horse racing. They have their own television network that broadcasts horse racing. And of course, they take bets there too. Then you have PokerStars, which is operating in New Jersey as well, the biggest poker brand in the world. Then you have the free-to-play stuff where the Stars Group and Fox came out with this Fox Sports Super 6, where you were able to make 6 predictions each week in college football and the NFL, which all they're doing is just gaining data on you through that too. So even if you're not playing real money, they have a way to get to you through free-to-play stuff. And then, of course, we mentioned the Fox Bet deal as well, which is another sports betting brand here. So, Jess, when you kind of take a look at this, there's no stone unturned as to how this new mega group can get to acquire customers, cross-promote, everything.
Yeah, you failed to mention the highly skilled game of DFS as well in this. With that, though, I think they're basically in every U.S. state, save for the ones that just don't do gambling. There are a couple of exceptions. I think they're not in Nevada, I guess. But that's a little bit of a weird one. And I think when you have that kind of scope and you can just hit people on every front, and you're now you've got arguably kind of the best sportsbook team between Fox Bet and FanDuel and what, the FanDuel app looks like. You've got the best poker team. And then both, with their powers combined, are now a much more competitive, viable online casino group. Betfair does well in New Jersey, and Stars obviously has a casino component, but I don't think we were naming either of these as top online casino players. With this consolidation, there's certainly room for them to jump up a ton in that venue as well.
Eric, if I'm not mistaken, this basically gets them reach to over half of the gaming states that would ever possibly actually have gaming, maybe even over half of the states that would ever actually have gaming in the U.S., right?
Yeah, I need to cross-check the map, but Stars Group actually had access to 20 states on its own before this, and I think Flutter about 16, and some of those overlap, but some don't. So I think about 25 is probably a good number. Some of those obviously don't have laws yet. A couple may never, like Texas and Florida, maybe not, but more access certainly than anyone else in the U.S. right now.
So, Dustin, this is a question that I got asked, and I don't obviously know the answer to this, so I'll go to you. And if you don't, then maybe there can at least be some speculation here. But Fox Bet is a sports book that is running. So is FanDuel, that is a sports book that is running. If these two companies come together, will we see the branding of both of these guys, like the promotion of both brands here? Or are we looking at maybe one goes away, the other one goes away, maybe one is in one state and the other's in another state? How do you think this all plays out?
No, I think, and they were actually pretty upfront in like the investor call and talking about it. They're going to deploy both brands. I don't think this is like the end of either. I think they're both two valuable brands on their own, and I don't see why you'd shut one of them down. Now they're going to get on the same back end, right? They're not going to continue writing two different tech stacks. So you're going to see all of the technology come under one roof. The apps will probably still look and feel a little different, but they're going to have the same underlying tech, is what I understand. And yeah, I don't see you're definitely going to just see if like everywhere you can and it's feasible and where you don't think they're cannibalizing each other too much, that you're going to see both FanDuel and Fox Bet, because I think they're two different brands. They have FanDuel has its database, which obviously will be deployed for Fox Bet as well. But you have there's just two different brands that I think both have value. So I don't know why you definitely want to deploy both of them in any state.
It sounds to me like in markets where both are not an option, they may favor the Fox Bet brand. Just reading between the lines from some of the comments in the presser, the CEO of Flutter, the first thing he mentioned off the bat was the Fox Sports partnership. Not even the Fox Bet, not gambling at all. It was the media partnership. So interesting. That kind of raised my eyebrow. That might be a big focus for them going forward.
And I mean, we'll look at the game last night. Fox had Thursday Night Football last night, and they were selling hard on that Terry Bradshaw free-to-play thing. Having that kind of platform and that kind of access, FanDuel is a good name, a good brand, but that kind of exposure you really can't beat.
So, Dustin, this Fox thing, if we remember correctly, whenever they did the deal with the Stars Group, there was one of the things we talked about here was how interesting it was that they had the option to buy such a massive amount of the Stars Group in the United States and get a hold of some of that company. They're still able to get into this new entity, just not as deep, right?
Yeah, so they can buy a large portion of FanDuel Group, is what if I remember correctly, is what the new deal is. So it's still has a chance to own a lot of this as the U.S. organization, but there's a lot of companies involved and a lot of redundancy and just a lot going on. So a long way till we shake that out. It's not even going to be a lot of road paved before then. I think 2021 is when that can actually kick in at all. But from a larger standpoint, and I've been taking crap for this take, I just don't see and you guys can argue with me, but I don't see who comes in and starts beating this combined group in the United States for sports betting. This is, to me, I understand we're only a year and a half into legal sports betting, that we only have a few states that are really live. We have, but we've seen FanDuel, one, absolutely crush the New Jersey market, two, come into Pennsylvania and open up shop and instantly be the number one brand there. Now you take Fox, which I was already pretty high on as a possibility, has this media mojo, has the tech and gambling wherewithal of the Stars Group behind it. That was already you could argue a good chance to rise to number 2 or number 1 in markets by itself. Now you put them together, what's going to happen in the gambling industry that's going to disrupt this? I guess I don't see that. Maybe I'm just being short-sighted, but as we said before, I will not be held accountable for this take because nobody will remember it. But I'm sitting here. I just don't see what the path is for somebody to disrupt this.
No,
tell me I'm wrong.
I was kind of amused that you took some heat for that on Twitter because you laid out a pretty compelling case in this piece on LSR. Just, like you said, very few people are even trying for that matter. You look at MGM and Caesars that are just already way behind in sports betting outside of Nevada. William Hill has some significant tech issues. The Score and BetWorks are startups with a lot of promise, but it's a startup right now. Looking ahead for the next 5 or 10 years, I just don't see anyone else either. I don't know who it's going to be if it's not going to be those guys.
Yeah. I saw someone said well, we were saying this about William Hill last year, and I'm going, I never thought this about William Hill. I mean, I certainly thought they were in a good position and in access to get in many states, but to compare that to what this is, I mean, I kind of thought it was a foregone conclusion that save for DraftKings, I don't know who would beat them.
I mean, I just look at it. I don't all of the brands. Let's say all the brands get into to new states as they open up, and that's going to happen a lot. It's going to happen in Indiana. But what's going to materially change how things operate? A lot of the companies we have talked about have not been willing to throw money at this problem. And this company and the combined company, I mean, Fox and Stars by itself and FanDuel by itself, were committed in spending money and saying, we're going to acquire customers. We're going to lead the market. That's great. Who else has the will and the money to say, yes, I'm going to do that? MGM can if it wants to, but we don't see the will to do that. They just kind of have said, oh, we're going to open up shop in New Jersey. We have the biggest casino in Atlantic City. People are just going to find us and it's going to be great. That has not happened. That has not worked at all. It is a rounding error in New Jersey's handle and revenue every month. So there's not a reason that things can't change. But as we sit here, as the markets, as we see the industry is evolving, what everybody's prioritizing and how they're acquiring customers, there's just not a whole lot of reason to believe that, one, anybody would have beat FanDuel on their own, and two, that this absolute giant company that's going to put a ton of resources and money into the sports betting problem in the U.S., I just don't see who's going to do that. Now, DraftKings still has a compelling brand, a compelling database. Does somebody acquire DraftKings down the road? Sure, maybe, but does that necessarily tip the balance? I don't think does it either.
So that would be the only thing, right? I guess is some other massive group coming in and acquiring DraftKings, but even then, I think it can't be undersold the media arm that is behind this as well, because that is also a play that just nobody else is going to be able to replicate unless we're talking about ESPN acquires DraftKings or something.
I take all this back if ESPN becomes a sports book. That's a no-brainer. Yeah. That would be huge. There's absolutely no reason to think that's going to be the case, even though there's been the moving around of the DraftKings equity that ended up under ESPN's umbrella. That can happen, but as we sit here, that's not going to happen. And somebody else, and again, NBC becomes a sports book, sure, and buys DraftKings. That's something. Who knows? That's not something that I think or will happen. But that's the kind of thing that I think you'd have to really compete.
Exactly, because the media arm is the thing that just you can't really replicate outside of it being one of these giant established media companies coming in and buying DraftKings. I mean, they are able to. If you're a horse bettor and if you like to bet horses, you are at least prone to gambling in some way, shape, or form. They have a horse racing network that they are able to reach sports bettors. They have a whole network in Fox where I sent you guys a screenshot the other night. I was just sitting watching, and it was just a preview show to boxing, and they actually were putting up Fox bet lines on this boxing preview show that they were just talking about upcoming boxing matches. It was just a general boxing show. I mean, to be able to have this built-in media reach that they are able to get in front of, it is just branding that's going to be constantly put in front of people's eyes that are targets for a company like this. And so, unless it is another major, massive media organization that comes in and gets into all of this, I just don't know how you really kind of compete with with a brand that's going to have the biggest brand in horse racing, the biggest brand in poker, the biggest brand in sports betting, potentially maybe down the line, the biggest brand in online casino as well. And then also has a media outlet as giant as Fox behind it too. So I don't know. I mean, Eric, is there anything we're missing here? Is there anything that maybe is sitting right in front of our face that we're just not grasping?
No, and just to even add to it, they now actually have multiple DFS brands if they want it. They have the draft brand as well. And if they want it, multiple poker brands. That Full Tilt brand is still sitting on mothballs. So, all of the brands involved in this are the biggest brands in their respective verticals. It's just enormous.
Again, I think you're right, Matt. I mean, there has to something. It's not that something can't happen, but I look at the market as situated. I don't see anybody organically just rising up and like saying they're going to compete with these two, with this new brand or this new dual brand. It's just I don't see, like, MGM and Caesars in particular, obviously big national casino brands. They just have not shown, either the will or the aptitude to kind of dominate in sports betting. Like I think they counted on, we have big names, like we're big in Vegas. We have a good database of casino players, and that just is not translated into anything in New Jersey. And again, I understand one market, but that's pretty indicative, I think, of how we're going to see it go down. I don't want to put too much into one market, but if we didn't have Pennsylvania launching on top of that and seeing FanDuel instantly, FanDuel has the advantage in New Jersey where they're right next to New York City, and people's like, maybe it's just because they're close to New York City. They opened up in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, which is, kind of close to Philadelphia, but not really. Ish. Not really. It's it's kind of the middle of nowhere. Where there's a Revolutionary War battle there, but there's no reason that FanDuel, other than it just has good brand and willingness to promote that brand, is dominating already, and I'm sure we're going to see that become even more lopsided, I would guess, when we see the next numbers come out for September.
And the next numbers are going to have Fox Bet, which if Fox Bet debuted at number 2, I wouldn't be surprised. So in Pennsylvania, you're setting yourself up that 1 and 2 are not going to be Rivers and Sugar House like it was the first couple months. It's going to be FanDuel and Fox Bet more than likely.
Yeah, and you go back to these free to play. You can kind of laugh those off, but in states where sports betting is imminent, those are pretty super valuable emails that you're collecting. You're just setting the stage for success. Other people are doing it too to some extent, but I don't think anybody's going I just did the Super 6 this week. It was 250,000 people playing that app already in like a few weeks. That's right. 250,000 emails that they've already acquired.
Exactly. And then they're able to market to for free, that they're able to market to that costs nothing. I guess
by giving away something that you're probably not going to win most weeks. If they happen to have to give away the $250,000 one week, which is pretty unlikely, as you would discuss as a parlay option. Yeah. Parlaying those six games and getting the score almost right. Pretty hard to do. So,
and one of the things the last thing we can hit on here, and that I've seen that people bring up is, this consolidation, not good for the player themselves. And I think to an extent that maybe that could be the case. But while this is a massive deal and while these will create two behemoths, there's no doubt about it. Listen, there are still brands out there, like we mentioned. There's still William Hill, there's still DraftKings, there's still The Score, which is, it's in its infancy, but they have plans to kind of get across out there. There is still Caesars and MGM that have casinos across this country, that are able to maybe do something. Bet365 is lurking out there. So it's not like PointsBet. I forgot to say, I forgot PointsBet. So it's not like this is just a death sentence to everybody else, but everybody else better step up their game. They better start doing some of these things that got FanDuel and Fox Bet to where they are, and they better start thinking creatively, because they're certainly at the very least playing from behind here.
I'd acquired DraftKings. It would be a ridiculous price at this point to buy DraftKings. If you were buying DraftKings, you should have done it 2 years ago. But that's the play if you really want to be serious right now. I think you want their database, 2, you want the brand. Like that's how you're going to compete. Anybody else trying to do it organically, you better have a lot of money rolled up behind it to get it.
This may be naive too, but I think, on the national level, sure. But as we're seeing in Pennsylvania, there are spaces where regional operators can succeed. I think Parks may be the example of what not to do. They relied pretty heavily on just name recognition. They're not doling out a lot of promotional credit, but Rivers and Sugar House, they're not in the poorhouse,
Right.
on sports betting. They're doing well for themselves, and they're carving out a market share in Pennsylvania. I think it's just that at the local level, you'll see some competition, but that at the national level, nobody is really going to be able to keep up. But I think the idea that nobody is going to succeed except these guys is probably overstating it.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, I'll be happy when you and I are going and covering the Poker Stars Open presented by FanDuel, brought to you by FoxBet, airing on TVG. And you can qualify for free on the Super 6 app as well as Betfair through a slot tournament. So yeah, I will.
If it somehow gets us the FanDuel Sportsbook and FoxBet in Nevada, I'm all for this. I don't know if we can get there, but
yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, this was an awesome podcast to be able to get through as much stuff as we were able to, and awesome of Jess to join us. Jess, we will have you on much more often, and of course, you will be involved in the G2E Megapod that we are going to do here in a couple weeks as well. So again, if you would like to join us on that pod and you have things to say, be sure and hit up Dustin Gouker on the Twitter machine. His DMs are open, and he will get things all scheduled up. But for Jess, for Dustin, for Eric, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.